I was a huge fan growing up of Bruce Lee, right? And so Bruce Lee, what was he known for? He was known for the art of fighting without fighting, right? He was known for not having a style, right? I mean, I don't know how many martial arts there are, but as a kid, I took Taekwondo, um, and you have judo. It sounds like maybe some jujitsu background, right? Something to that effect. Um, and but when you get in a fight, you're not using your style per se. You're defending yourself and attacking your your attacker, right? And your skills come in based on how you train. So I think it goes the same for financial planning, right? We just have tools, and it's up to us to use those tools to help you get from point A to point B to point C to point D, and so on and so forth.
All right, welcome everybody back to the Growing Money with Sean Trace podcast. I've got an awesome guest with me today. Now, would you like to tell people who you are and a little bit about what you do?
Yes, my name is Patrick Negado. I'm a husband to my wife, an alpha daddy to my 3 dogs. I'm a retirement income and wealth transfer strategist, financial advisor, creator of the Canoe and Current retirement system, and author of the Canoe and The Current, Rethinking Retirement so you can stop worrying and start living. 28-year financial professional in the industry, worn different hats, and currently an independent financial advisor.
That's awesome. Well, this brings me to the first question. And the Canoe and the Current is an awesome read. And I want to ask you this. Why did you feel that the retirement conversation needed a reset? Like, why did you say, hey, I need to write this book? And what was it that sparked you to really think that things were kind of going the wrong direction?
Candidly, Sean, I think it's because I'm a terrible communicator. When I'm talking to people and I kind of give them the idea of what retirement should look like, as the old saying goes in sports, you don't think about your championships, you think about your losses, right? So I think I've had where I feel like I've failed the potential client by not being able to articulate exactly in proper terminology and proper metaphor or whatever you want to call it to get them to act in the right fashion. I think it's going to get them to their destination. So I think what happened was over the years, I've kind of had this book kind of written in outline format over the last 7 years, and then finally crystallized it probably a few months before. And I think I told you this earlier, we moved to Utah, going down one of the highways to go to town, because we live up in ski country. So to go down one of the highways, there's a river heading down, and you see people canoeing, floating, fly fishing, whatever it might be. And the original title of the book was not The Canoe and the Current. And then I realized that's the metaphor I should use for retirement, because the canoe should be something that you can rely on and live off of while you're riding the current of retirement, right? The current could be rough, it could be smooth, but the current essentially is your investable assets or your investment assets to go in the market so you can take some more risks. But if you have a solid canoe, you're not going to worry about what market conditions are. So I think that's where it kind of came. That's the inspiration behind it, where my failures more than my successes. Let's put it that way.
I love that. I when I was growing up, I remember my dad used to get these weird things in trade. I love my dad, but man, he collected some weird stuff at times. But one of the things that we had end up at our house was this big green canoe. And the thing was ugly as hell. It was a fiberglass canoe. And I remember one day when we were looking at this canoe, and he set it up and was talking about how he was going to get someone to come fix it up. And so he went inside to test. He wanted to step inside to see how things were holding up. And a foot went straight through the bottom of the canoe. And we were just like, whoa, that is not a canoe that will float. I remember a couple of weeks later, we went over to a friend's house, and they had this very beautiful, 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 beautiful high-end wood canoe. It was, like these laminated piece of wood that were put together, and this thing was beautiful. And not just that, when we got it in the water, man, it flew. It just glided across the lake like nothing else. And when I started looking at your book and reading your book, I just kept coming back to these two canoes because one of those canoes you would want to, I would take whitewater, I would go on anything in. That canoe was solid, that canoe was sound, that canoe would carry you through anything. The other one, I wouldn't even want to get it into a puddle because you're going to get wet, and those currents are going to toss you into the water and beat you up. So it's such a great analogy that the canoe is so important.
Absolutely. And again, once you've built a solid canoe, you are then going to feel secure about riding that wave of retirement, right? So what does a canoe consist of? Some people usually ask that question. It's obviously talked about in the book. Well, first and foremost, Social Security, right? Being in America, we still have Social Security, which is fantastic. So that's where you get some of your guaranteed income from, Social Security. There used to be a thing called pensions, right? You and I might remember that, but I don't think
Hmm.
that's not really around anymore so much
Yeah.
today. But if you're still fortunate enough to have pensions, then absolutely, then you have that as part of your guaranteed income, right? And then the third option is, okay, what do we do with if there's still a gap between what we need for essentials and what's available to us? Then we consider essentially properly structured annuities, right? Now, some people don't like annuities, and that's perfectly fine. But I always ask people, where else are you going to get the guarantees you're hoping to get that's going to pay you for the rest of your life, right? I only know of one thing that does that. That's guaranteed, and there are annuities. Well, of course, it's claims paying ability for the insurance company, yada yada. But the point is that's the only thing that offers that in lieu of a pension, for instance. Now, that's not our number one focus. Our second, that is our number one focus, I will say, but that's not our only focus. The next focus, of course, is we still need to invest your money to make sure we're keeping up with inflation. And really, that's how we strategically use the current to our advantage, right? If you have a solid canoe, you don't have to worry about market conditions because your essentials are paid for. When markets reward you, you harvest. You use that for vacations. You use that to replenish your canoe if you want to. You use that to gift to your children and grandchildren, whatever you want to use it for. But that's what the current's going to be for, is for you to basically harvest when you're rewarded. So, so hopefully that concept resonates with people.
I think it. I hope so, and it's a good thing because I think that when I started learning, I started this podcast, and I'll say this every single episode because I did not know about all of these things, and when I was learning about started talking about retirement, and my wife and I were talking about this, and I was learning about how like the different shape of like spending and like what people had to prepare for, things in retirement, that fun things like the go-go years, and I was just like, this is all wild, and it's like there's a lot to think about. But one of the things that people in my family we didn't always talk about was how do you prepare for that, it's like, and I have some family friends that are very well prepared, they built beautiful canoes, and then I have other people that get to that point and they don't even have a canoe, like they're just like sitting there and they're like in a tin can, and one of the things that I think is really special about this metaphor is that um it really helps simplify retirement planning. It helps you sit there and think about, all right, I need something that can carry me through uncertainty. All right, well, that's pretty simple to break it down. Like, what are the things that are going to carry you? Because the reality is you have some things that you have to watch out for. You have the rocks over there. That's going to be inflation. You've got, some turmoil, some whitewater over here. Well, that's going to be, the market kind of going through different cycles. And if you can sit there and break down, all right, the analogies, well, what are we doing here? What is this? What are the tools you can use? I remember once I'm a black belt in judo, and I was training with one of these kids that was from the Kodokan in Japan, like what the judo school in Japan, like the original one. This kid was good, and we're talking like really good. And one of the things that we were talking about is he came to our school and he's like, "Wow, you guys learn a lot of techniques." And he's like, "That's amazing." And I was like, "Well, what do you don't learn a lot of techniques?" He's like, "No, no, no, no. I've got one." And we're like, "Well, come on, man." He's like, "No, no, 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 no. I've got one technique, but I'm really good at it." And I was like, well, what is it? And he's like, oh, it's Seiwinagi. And I was like, this one hip throw. And I was like, okay, yeah. He's like, I'm going to tell you what it is, but I'll still get you with it. And we're like, yeah, whatever, man. Man, I was on my back on the mat so fast. I didn't even see it coming. This kid was so good at it. And why I'm bringing this up is that he had a tool that worked really, really well. And the reality is he had a lot of different tools. He joked that he had one tool, but he had a multitude of tools that worked well. Now, when we start looking at it, I think that when we're talking about retirement, people have to realize there are certain sets of tools. It might seem daunting, it might seem like this big thing, but if you can start to understand what the tools are, well, what is your ore? Like what are you using to power yourself forward? What are you using to create a base? And I mean, thinking about the right accounts. I was working with my financial planner recently, and he was like, all right, these are the accounts that we need to make sure we have set up. This is what we need to be allotting. This is what you need to be doing. And I was like, man, why didn't I get all this done before? I'm an idiot. And he's like, no, you're behind though, but it's okay. And we're going to educate you and get you caught up. And I think that's a big thing too, is like when you can start getting people to look at these things, whether it be through a metaphor or through really simplifying it, you get people on board, because people get overwhelmed when things are too complicated.
That is absolutely correct. One of the things I think that's frustrating for a lot of people in today's environment is um, the overwhelming amount of information available to them, right? In addition to
Right.
that, you have other advisors with their own biases, or other pundits with their own opinions, that it literally paralyzes people from taking action. And that's why I always tell people, I'm going to simplify it for you. We don't need to make it complicated, because sometimes complicated is not the best thing for you. Right now, if we meet somebody who's a high net worth individual, that's completely different, right? But the average person doesn't need overcomplicated plans. What they need is simple, predictable, and something they can execute without fear, right? And so that's kind of that's why I
I
developed the
love that.
system that I did. And part of the system, and candidly, when people retire, they don't really think about what it looks like. Think about this for a second. The day you resign and you're saying, this is it for me, what's next? I've had clients come to me a year after retirement saying, don't do it, because you need to have a reason to put on your pants in the morning, and you can only play golf so much, right? And then I've had clients say, I'm really happy I've retired. I'm taking care of the grandkids, and that consumes me, right? And that's great. So either way, people generally don't have a plan. They have an idea of what they want to do, just like you kind of mentioned it, the go-go years. We're going to travel. We're going to do all this stuff. Well, I travel quite a bit. And candidly speaking, after about a week at the beach, I'm done, right? After about three weeks, let's say in the Philippines or Italy or Europe, I want to go home and sleep on my bed, right? So there's only so much. Yeah, there's only so much you
100%.
can really do travel wise, right? So retirement is kind of like, so people don't know what it looks like. And so I think it was a former German Kaiser that was asked about retirement. So one of the soldiers came up to him and said, "Hey, how old is retirement age? What is the retirement age? What should be the retirement age for our troops, right?" And so he asked the question, "What's the average life expectancy today?" He's all 65. Then let it be 65, right? So that may be where it came from. I heard that somewhere before. So what I encourage our clients to do is, before they really make that final decision to retire, they should create a retirement vision statement. So I have a questionnaire, I have them complete. It's in 4 parts. It's not that deep. It's about 20 questions. The point is, it'll give them the questions to ask themselves, so that they can discuss it between the spouses and determine, is this really what we want for retirement? And then use that as a plan to put together for building their canoe, or solidifying their canoe for that matter, and then taking a portion of whatever they've built over time and put that and keep that remaining in the current section, meaning the market, right? And so that's the idea, is if they can create a retirement vision statement, then I think they can have better clarity of what their retirement's going to look like. Because candidly, once the paycheck stops, you cannot afford to make mistakes because you don't have any paychecks coming in to make up for those mistakes, right?
Yeah, right. And it's like, and there's all this advice out there, and there's a lot of advice out there, and you'll get it. And there's a million different people that have a million different opinions, and they're telling you, but sometimes the old mindset, like just accumulate, can make you feel a little anxious in and of itself. Do you have enough? Have you saved enough? Is because, like you said, if you made a mistake and you didn't, do something right, um, you can feel left adrift on that river, left adrift in the current. How are some of the old mindsets putting people at risk when it comes to retirement?
That's a great question. There's two things that come to mind really fast, and one of them is in the book, which is the 60-40 equity to bond split once you get to retirement age. Right? There's an old saying, you as you get older, you want to decrease your equity holdings and increase your bond holdings. And then once you retire, we'll keep it at 60-40, so you can still kind of keep up with inflation, although not quite as good, but still. And then take about 4%. Hopefully you can get that in a combination of yield and dividend income, and so that you don't have to touch principal. So that's the old mindset that came out around, let's say 1992, 3, 4, 5, around there. And the idea behind that is you will not have to touch principal. If you have to, then you're not taking too much. The problem with that, however, is back then interest rates were significantly higher. They're lower now. Now they've cracked up a little bit, but the average yield on a bond today is probably between 3 to 5%. The average dividend rate is between 4 to 6, right? But generally speaking, when you're looking at a AAA bond, it's much lower, right? And so, in looking at that, you're thinking, okay, great. If I had $1 million, then I can maybe comfortably live off $40,000 a year and never have to worry about touching principal, or at least if I did, it'll be minimal, right? And so that's fine. So that's the old mindset. And what I say is that's a ticking time bomb, because if you happen to retire at the wrong time, let's say you retired January 1, 2020, right? Do you remember what happened then? Right? Market crashed 30% over the next 6 months. And if you're drawing your 4% income from that, well, if you were just drawing for 4%, then it's less because your balance went down. However, if you still needed to take the $40,000, then guess what? You're not touching your principal, right? So that's the one thing. So the second thing that's basically associated with that is you've had plenty of pundits criticize the use of annuities, right? In fact, there's very famous pundits who say annuities are a waste of money. They're expensive. They're all this and all that. That's the old mindset, right? Annuities years ago, for you to take advantage of it, you would have to annuitize it, right? And what does that mean? When you annuitize a contract, you're drawing guaranteed income until the day you die, right? Basically, you're going to maximize your income. Now, you can also schedule for survivorship, but essentially, if you want the maximum payout, you're gonna draw guaranteed income until the day you die. Now, if you die tomorrow, the insurance company wins. They get to keep the rest of your money, right? Now, if you live too long, you beat the insurance company. So latest developments over the years, and this has been probably the last 15, 20 years, uh, annuities now offer what's called a lifetime guarantee income, which is perhaps a play on words on contract. But this will continue to pay you guaranteed income without annuitizing the contract, right? So what does that mean? You die tomorrow, whatever's left over in your account goes to your beneficiaries. So the pundits today who criticize annuities do not mention that. They just say it's expensive, it's a bad deal. But anyway, you were going to ask a question.
No, no. I mean, see, this is the thing that I think that one of the challenges that I see in the financial industry is that there's a lot going on. And let me explain what I'm meaning. You have some people, there's a lot of conflicting advice. You get some people telling everyone telling everyone play it safe. You get some people telling everyone stay in the market, go hard. But the reality is that you need a little bit of both. There needs to be some stability, and there also needs to be some risk. And I think that for the average person, it's really hard at times to know what is more important at what time? Because that's the thing, though, with investments. Like you said, if you did something on January 1, 2020, it's going to be different than if you did something at a year where things were getting ready to go really good. And I had some friends that, let me give an example. 2006, I had some really good friends that were like, yeah, everything's awesome right now. And everyone is buying houses. We're buying a house too because it's going to be a great deal. And they got in and they spent $600,000 for a 2-bedroom condo in Los Angeles. And shortly thereafter, the housing bubble burst, and they were sitting there holding on to a property that now was valued at about 210,000. Now, here's the thing. I'm sure now the value of that has gone way back up, and they probably have made money back. But there is the thing is that advice is not always perfect. Maybe it was a great decision to buy that house. Maybe it wasn't at that moment. And maybe by holding on to it for a certain amount of years, they've been able to sell it and now make money back. But when anyone tries to tell you that one thing fits for everyone, it just doesn't. There's a number of things that people can try. And I think that that's the important thing for me, is that when I'm sitting there thinking about this and I'm talking to people and my friends and they go, what financial advice would you give XYZ? And I was like, well, you know what? Every single person's canoe is going to look a little bit different. Certainly, all of these canoes are made to float. All of the canoes are going to be made to carry your weight, but some canoes flow really, really fast. Some canoes are built for stability. And it just depends upon what it is that you want your canoe to do. Maybe if it's super, super stable, it's not going to go as fast down that river. But maybe you just want to be safer in your canoe. And that's the cool thing, is that people can kind of create the boat they want to create.
You mentioned you're into martial arts, right? I was a huge fan growing up of
Yeah.
Bruce Lee, right? And so Bruce Lee, what was he known for? He was known for the art of fighting without fighting, right? He was known for not having a style, right? I mean, I don't know how many martial arts there are, but as a kid, I took Taekwondo, um, and you have judo. It sounds like maybe some jujitsu background, right? Something to that effect. Um, and but when you get in a fight, you're not using your style per se. You're defending yourself and attacking your your attacker, right? And your skills come in based on how you train. So I think
Yeah.
it goes the same for financial planning, right? We just have tools, and it's up to us to use those tools to help you get from point A to point B to point C to point D, and so on and so forth. What tends to happen in our industry is we're somewhat cannibalistic, right? I hate to say it. You have advisors who speak badly about other advisors, who say this particular strategy is no good, so on and so forth. But really, we just have tools, right? And when people say, and again, the biggest criticism for annuities is this, and that. And again, I don't want to be accused of just hawking annuities, because I don't. That's just part of the toolbox, right? But I always tell my clients, I'm going to digress
Yeah.
for a second. In 2001, I opened my own investment advisory firm. So I was fee-based only. That's it. I was fee-only advisor. I did not have any quote-unquote commission products. Um, and then I was doing quite well versus the S&P 500 index. I was beating it by 13 points throughout that time, and I lost a client to another advisor. And when I saw the transfer paperwork, I saw he was going into a variable annuity. And of course, the biggest criticism for variable annuities are they're expensive, because they are very expensive. But the question I've learned to ask since then is, what do you get in return for the fees you're paying? Right? If you're not getting anything for it, then obviously it's a bad thing. But if you're getting something good for it, then you need to examine whether those fees are worth it or not. And so I told my client, listen, I asked him, why are we moving? I mean, I'm just calling, this is mainly for me to improve my services. Well, the returns haven't been good. Well, quite candidly, if I were a big mutual fund company, I would be a superstar, because I've consistently been in the S&P 500 and I'm up 13 points, right? And he goes, well, it's the fee structure. I said, okay, well, we're charging you a standard fee for what a financial advisor would charge for managing assets. He's like, well, it's my nephew. I said, okay, no problem. Either way, I'm going to move. It's not like I'm going to hold on to it. It's just I just want to know for my sake. And then when I saw the details of what that contract offered, I said, this is not something I can replicate. Right? It offered uh, locked in growth on the income side for your money. It offered guaranteed income for the rest of your life. I couldn't offer that, but as a fee-based advisor only. So I said, I have to be able to incorporate this in my toolbox. Otherwise, I'm I'm going to lose to these guys, right? And so being on that side of the table, what is your only criticism? You'll well, why would you want to put your money in annuities when you're paying way too much for it? That's the only way you can really win that business, so to speak. So I've kind of gone to a point in my career where I do my best to not have any biases, right? I tell my clients, you can pay me a fee, you
Mm.
can pay me a commission. It's either way because at the end of the day, I'm gonna pick the tools that's going to get you from point A to point B to point C to point D, right? And if that means we need to use some commissionable products, we will, because those are products that have some features that are quite attractive. And candidly, you're not the one paying me the commission; the company is, right? So I could be accused of being biased in that way, but I said I have 36 companies at my disposal. How biased could I possibly be, right? So essentially, and then of course on the investment side, well, that's just what everybody does. We'll manage your money the way we see fit. We'll pick the right stocks, pick the right investments, yada yada, and get you to that point, right? But I've kind of grown out of that mindset of let's criticize blah blah blah. I have to examine if I'm taking over a new client, I have to examine what the prior advisor did, because another lesson learned in my career has been kind of like built on learning from mistakes. 1999, do you remember that year? Um, those were fantastic, fabulous years in the market. I took on a client that was referred to me, and I looked at her portfolio, and I noticed over the last few years the rate of return was averaged about 8%. And I was young, dare I say it, and stupid, right? And I said, I can get you this mutual fund, that mutual fund, and they've been giving us an average of 40, 50, 60% over the last few years, right? You're not supposed to say that, but I said, but these are what they've done. And so why are you sitting on something that's giving you 8% average, right? If you remember Janus funds, some of those were returning 150% a year because they were tech funds. Um, and so 2000 hits, Y2K, 2001, and of course, she loses 40, 60%, and I lose her as a client. Deservingly so, right? I deserve to lose her as a client. I kept her statements from the prior advisor, and I took a look at it and kind of back tested it to see what it would have done during 2000, the Y2K years, and 9/11. And candidly speaking, she would not have lost as much money as she did with where I put her in. So that's a lesson that was hard learned for me, because what that person was actually doing was putting her in a defensive position in preparation for, and perhaps I don't know if he was that smart to see the writing on the wall, but he was preparing her for a downward market cycle, right? And so I thought to myself, in my young arrogance, I can't do this again. I can't do this. I need to be better and be more studious, or at least be more careful about how I'm advising clients on how to invest their money, right? Because in that situation, she would not have lost as much as she did with the funds I put her in. So um, so I guess in some ways, like, admitting that to you on here is kind of scary, but it is what it is, right? And so those are kind of, I draw from those experiences to make sure I do better for the people I work with.
Which comes to facing the unknowns. I mean, there are all types of shocks, inflation, longevity. All of these things there's a lot for people, for these retirees to be scared of. How does your new system protect people from these curveballs?
Great question. First and foremost, if your essentials are paid for, meaning mortgage, if you still have it, property taxes, health insurance, your your living expenses, your most important living expenses. If that's paid for, you can let all the other things are just noise. Because one thing's for sure, right? And I shouldn't say it's for sure because it's never guaranteed, but I've been doing this for 28 years. And the last I checked, we've just had another record high with the markets, right? Even though we have your doomsayers saying, well, we'll have another recession, we'll have another this, another crash, and things like that. And yet the markets continue to do well. So if as much as the sun rises from the east, at some point, even if we have market downward cycles, it has to go up, and it has gone up. So I always like to tell my clients, we never want to not invest in equities. But what we want to do is, in the case of retiring, is make sure that your essentials are taken care of so that when you go through a rough patch or when you see the rock on the side of the river there, or if you lose your oar, then you have an extra oar in the canoe, right? Because you've planned for it, right?
Yeah.
And so that's the main thing is
Hmm.
having that sense of security. And again, I'm not perfect. My clients are not perfect. Not all my clients are following my system, right? I mean, I'm trying to get them there. And candidly speaking, some people the whole conversation is overwhelming. So sometimes it can just like the old saying is, "How do you eat an elephant?" Well, it's one bite at a time. So sometimes you just kind of have to shepherd them through until they finally kind of see the light and say, "Okay, I really need to do this." And so it really that's the inspiration for the book. And I shared it with some clients once it's done. Once I released it, and she'll probably be watching this podcast. But one of my clients who she after she read the book, she came in my office and said, "Finally, I'm going to stop looking because I think you really understand what I'm going through." Right. And really, if she paid me a great compliment. She said, "I started working with you when my husband died, and you were the only one who didn't take advantage of me." And then she said, "I still keep looking
Wow.
around, and I realize after reading your book, you really understand how to get me to a secure retirement." And I don't take that lightly, right? Because candidly speaking, she's had other advisors take advantage of her. It was significant five figure amounts that was taken away from her, right? And that's money she won't get back. And so, in some ways, that's kind of where as much as I don't want to criticize competition, I am cynical about other advisors, other people who claim to be advisors, because there are some people out there who just really do take advantage of people, and I do feel bad about that. So, and it makes us all look bad.
Well, and it's tricky too because retirement planning is really an emotional thing. There is a lot of emotion involved, which makes people sometimes easy to be preyed upon. When there's emotions and someone comes along and seems like they're gonna help provide safety or clarity. But how do we help people shift out of that anxiety and try to shift into clarity and confidence? Because if they have more clarity, first of all, they can be less uh, easy to take advantage of by people. And second of all, the more clarity you have, it's like if you never go canoeing and suddenly you get to some whitewater, it's going to be really hard. It's going to be really scary. It's going to be really overwhelming. But if you go regularly and you're like, hang on, I know what this is. This is a class one, man. This is not that bad. Yeah, that class five had last week. Now that was an adventure. But this is minor. We can handle this. It takes clarity and it takes confidence to get there. How do you think we can get more people to that place?
That's a perfect segue into the Canoe and Current system. And again, we didn't plan this conversation this way, but you couldn't have set it up better for
Not at
me.
all.
So the Canoe and Current system is designed to give you clarity, so you can have confidence in the decisions you make, and then it will hopefully create a stable retirement living for you, right? And that's really how I develop the system. So we start with the discovery process, right? The discovery process will identify where the threats are and try to eliminate them, the opportunities to capture those opportunities, and the strengths that you've done, because you've obviously done something right. And so what we're going to do is reinforce those strengths, right? We analyze the second step is once we get all that information, we'll analyze those critical factors, prioritize, or at least make sure we prioritize what's most important to you. That way, we can give you some options for you to make a decision on. And again, we make recommendations, give you multiple options. That way, you're not stuck. You're not stuck with one. We want to make sure you understand what those options, what the positives and negatives are. And then, of course, the third step is the breakthrough strategy. We'll implement it and monitor it from here on, right? So once you know what your options are, what the positives and negatives of those options are, you can then decide which one of these is the best suited for what I can live with. And like I said, that's where the whole creating your retirement vision statement comes into play, because most people don't know, nor can they articulate what they want for retirement, right? And so if you can create that statement first, in which case you can then laser focus your plan with the recommendations we make based on what you feel most comfortable with. And that's really where that comes down to. Um, and of course, when we're successful with it, or at least when you feel secure with what we've put into place, towards the end of the book, I talk about uh, creating a family financial philosophy. Right? There's an old saying, from is it? I can never remember the actual quote, but it's from poor house to poor house in three generations. Right? Like you have one generation who, let's say, immigrates to the United States, builds a nice middle class lifestyle. Second generation gets even better, but then they pass on to the third generation that squanders it, right? Because they don't know how difficult it was for their prior generations to build what they've had. So the whole idea behind a family financial philosophy is really I help them create your financial biography, right? And how you feel about money, how you built it, how you want to transfer it to the next generations, and how you want them to be stewards of it, right? And so if you can just kind of articulate that, then the next generations would then have an appreciation for what you've left behind. Is that could be your legacy, right? So it's a whole planning process of the Canoe and the Current system.
I love that. And one of the things that I really enjoy about that is that you're talking about a vision. I remember the other day I was getting on a call with my financial planner, and we were looking, and he was not in the room yet, and Google Meet was allowing me to change my background, and it was letting me look at certain places. Like one was the beach, one was a place in the mountains. What I sat there and thought of in that moment, I was like, would I like to live here? Like, no, man, this would give me anxiety. Do I want to be here? Now, dude, this is way too cold. Do I want to be here? And finally, I got to this one tropical looking place that looked a whole lot like the beach near here. And I was like, yeah, that's where I'd like to be. And what clicked for me at that moment was that we all have this idea. We all certainly know what we don't want to be doing. And sometimes you got to work backwards from there. Like, what do I not want to be doing? Well, I don't want to be working my 9 to 5, but what would I like to be doing? You start working with that. And again, one of the great examples I have is that my father, when he retired, he went back to school. He studied massage, and he became a massage therapist and started running a massage school, teaching other people how to take care of people. He worked in business for years, worked in marketing and advertising. And suddenly he was like, I want something else. I spent all this time doing this stuff, and now I want to learn to like help people take care of their bodies and care for themselves. And it was something that gave him purpose. And with it, he's still doing it. He's still doing it because he loves it. He's 80 something and he just loves driving across the country and going to teach workshops and clinics. And I was like, are you ever going to slow down? He's like, I don't necessarily want to, because this is what I love doing. And I said, well, then keep doing it. Keep having fun with it. Because if that's your stuff that you love and it gives you purpose, then own it and have that as your core value, and your canoe should be aligned with that.
But he may have found his life's work, right? So I always tell people, or I'm talking to people, I said, people retire because their job is a means to an end. It's not really what they want to do. I'm in the financial services industry. I've been doing this for 28 years. I can foresee myself doing this until the day I die. The best part about being in this business is the older you get, the smarter you seem. Number one,
Yeah.
and number two,
Right.
the better income you make because you've accumulated assets under management and things like that. So I can't foresee myself ever retiring. I may slow down and maybe bring on more junior advisors and then have them kind of do the service work, but I can't see myself retiring. I've found my life's work, right? Not everybody can say that. It's very difficult. So when people retire, a lot of times it's because their job is a means to an end and they're just tired of doing it. But most people who retire do try to find something else to do instead of their hobbies, because hobbies, once you know you can do your hobby anytime you want, you actually don't do it. I can play, right? I can play golf anytime I want. I got to tell you, I've played golf once in the last 4 years. So I'm going to play this weekend because my realtor invited me to play, so I'm going to play. But other than that, I don't feel the need to play. Now, I was in corporate America for a while, and yeah, I always wanted to be on the golf course when I worked for corporate America because I know I didn't have the choice, right? So it's kind of like you're rebelling against what you're made to do. So, uh, but most people they want to retire, and that's what I'm here for. Help them do is help shepherd them through that. For the people who are retiring, who are going to go back to find their life's work, we'll shepherd them through that too. But like I said, it's not one size fits all. It's we will plan according to you, right? We will plan based on what you want. We will we will use the martial arts style that gets us to defeat our opponent, so to speak, right? As Bruce Lee says, "Be water, my friend." Right? So we are not married to one strategy or this. The concept is clear. Let's build a solid canoe. That canoe will be built based on what you feel most comfortable using, right? And then the current will ride the proper current that gets you to your destination as quickly and as safely as we possibly can.
I love that. Dude, that's like a mic drop moment right there. Uh, let me ask you this. One last question, and then I would love to let people know where they can find more information about you. If you could go back in time and give some financial advice to your younger self, what advice would you give yourself?
That's a very good question. It's not really a financial advice, more so than I'd say a business advice. As I said before, I had an investment advisory firm between 2000 and 2003, and I sold it. I probably would have told myself, do not quit. Keep it up. It's just a matter of time before
Mm,
we get over the hump. Now, I was very motivated by back then, but I was tired, right? I mean, I like to tell people being in the financial services industry, once you've kind of been doing it for as long as I have, you're really a survivor, right? Because there's so much struggling in the beginning.
yeah.
I mean, I can remember entering the business in 1997, um, doing cold calls, right? Being hung up on, getting your feelings hurt, and I was broke because I wasn't getting a salary, so I was taking second jobs. Right, I was working at night. I did a security job at night. I'd go to work from 10 to 6, and then sleep for a full few hours and go to the office because we didn't have cell phones back then, right? So I would actually go to the office to San Francisco and work for a few hours, and if I had appointments, I'd go visit with people. I did that for some time, and then I finally tasted some success. But again, um, as a as a when you become a champion boxer, right? It's not the fact that you finally got there. It's now how do you defend your title, right? So I did not know how to defend my title. So I would have advised myself to not spend my money to reinvest it in marketing. so uh so I think all that because I struggled for so long, and I finally made some money, and instead of reinvesting in my business, I spent it. So I think that's what I would have come back to that and say, Patrick, you gotta spend some money on marketing. You have to increase your business. You cannot sustain this with how you were doing business before. Essentially, you got lucky because you landed one big client, right? Actually, two. But the fact of the matter is you need to be able to sustain that. So winning the WBC championship means nothing. You have to defend it and then get the IBF and WBA along the way, right? So
100%. Well, where can people find out more about you and your style?
great. Canoe and the Current, excuse me, canoeandcurrent.com is where you can get more information on my book. If you want to talk to me, you can get a free copy of the book and schedule a quick 30-minute call, 30 minute video meet like this. where I can help address some of your concerns. It's no obligation. We are always more than happy to help and give you a second opinion. You can find me on LinkedIn as well. So.